Tonight, someone will say, "I'll sleep tomorrow." A student before an exam, a parent finishing work, an entrepreneur chasing a deadline. It feels harmless, just one night. But if you could look inside your brain the very next morning, you would see something physicians find deeply concerning. Because sleep is not simply rest. It is neurological maintenance. During the night, your brain runs what we often call a biological cleanup cycle, clearing metabolic waste, recalibrating emotional circuits, and resetting the networks responsible for judgment. Miss that cycle once, and the brain does not stay silent. It compensates. But compensation comes at a cost. I once evaluated a surgical resident who had been awake for nearly 28 hours. Brilliant, highly trained, yet during a simple cognitive test, his reaction time matched that of someone legally intoxicated. He looked at me and said, "Doctor, I didn't realize my brain was this slow." Most people don't. As pioneering sleep researcher Dr. William Dement warned, sleep is the golden chain that ties health and our bodies together. Break that chain, even briefly, and the effects begin faster than you imagine. Here's the unsettling part. After just one night of insufficient sleep, brain scans show reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for decision-making, impulse control, and rational thought. At the same time, the emotional center of the brain becomes more reactive. In simple terms, the logical brain quiets, while the emotional brain gets louder. This is why small problems feel overwhelming after a poor night's sleep. But the change most people notice first is not emotional, it is cognitive. Because by morning your brain is already operating differently. Let's step into those first waking hours, where the neurological shift becomes measurable. When you wake up after too little sleep, most people assume the problem is just fatigue. But medically, something far more precise is happening. Your brain is experiencing reduced neural efficiency. Imagine trying to run advanced software on a device that was never fully charged. It still works, just not reliably. One of the first systems affected is attention control. Brain imaging studies show that sleep deprivation weakens communication between neurons responsible for focus. This is why you may read the same sentence twice, forget why you walked into a room, or struggle to follow conversation. It is not laziness, it is neurobiology. As neuroscientist Dr. Matthew Walker famously said, "The shorter your sleep, the shorter your life, and the less functional your brain becomes." Now here is where it becomes clinically concerning. After even one night of restricted sleep, reaction time can drop significantly, sometimes comparable to having alcohol in your system. In hospital training, we warn young physicians about this with a simple rule: fatigue makes fools of the sharpest minds. Let me give you a real-world example. A well-rested driver notices a braking car in about a second. A sleep-deprived brain, it may take twice as long. That delay can be the difference between control and catastrophe. But slower thinking is only part of the story. Your brain also loses something critical that night: its emotional filter. Without adequate sleep, the brain struggles to separate minor stress from genuine threat. Suddenly, small inconveniences feel intensely personal. Patience shortens. Irritation rises. Judgment slips. And yet, most people still go to work believing they are functioning normally. They are not. But what happens deeper inside the brain over the next several hours is even more unsettling. Because certain regions begin entering what neurologists call local sleep. Let's talk about that next. Here's something most people have never been told: you don't need to be fully asleep for your brain to start sleeping. After a night of insufficient rest, neuroscientists observe a phenomenon called local sleep. It sounds harmless. It isn't. Local sleep occurs when tiny clusters of neurons briefly power down. Even while you are awake, walking, talking, working, or driving, for a fraction of a second, that part of your brain simply goes offline. You won't feel it happen, but you will see the consequences. Ever missed a turn while driving? Forgot a familiar password? Sent a message you didn't mean to send? Those are often micro-errors, signs that the brain's precision is slipping. As sleep scientist Dr. Chiara Cirelli explains, sleep is not optional for the brain, it is a biological necessity. When the brain is denied it, performance becomes unpredictable. Let me share a clinical observation. A young engineer once told me, "Doctor, I stared at my screen for 10 minutes before realizing I hadn't processed a single word." His eyes were open, his brain briefly wasn't. Now here is where the risk escalates. These micro shutdowns dramatically increase the chance of accidents. Studies have shown that being awake for around 18 to 20 hours can impair performance similarly to alcohol intoxication. Yet people would never drive drunk, while many routinely drive sleep-deprived. But the most dangerous change after sleep loss isn't just slowed thinking, it is overconfidence. The sleep-deprived brain loses the ability to accurately judge its own impairment. In other words, the worse your brain performs, the less aware you are of it. And beneath all of this, another powerful shift is taking place, one that directly affects your mood, stress response, and emotional stability. Let's step into that next. After just one night of poor sleep, your brain becomes neurologically unbalanced, not damaged, but tilted. Here's what brain scans consistently reveal: the amygdala, the region responsible for detecting threat and generating emotional reactions, becomes up to 60% more reactive. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, the rational, calming part of your brain, loses influence. Think of it like removing the brakes from a moving car. Emotions accelerate. Logic struggles to catch up. This is why, after a little sleep, people often say things like, "I don't know why that upset me so much, I overreacted. Everything felt overwhelming." It isn't a personality flaw. It is temporarily altered brain chemistry. As renowned neurologist Dr. Alan Hobson once noted, sleep is the single most effective thing we can do to reset our emotional brain. Without it, your psychological resilience drops. Let me give you a real-world example. A physician I worked with, calm, highly experienced, once snapped at a colleague after being on call all night. Later, he admitted, "That wasn't me. I was running on fumes." Exactly. Sleep deprivation shortens the distance between stimulus and reaction. Patience shrinks. Empathy weakens. Stress feels amplified. And there is something even more fascinating and concerning. Your brain begins interpreting neutral faces as negative. In controlled studies, sleep-deprived participants were far more likely to misread harmless expressions as hostile. Imagine the implications for conversations, relationships, workplace decisions. But the effects don't stop with mood. Because while your emotional brain is becoming louder, another critical system is quietly losing its strength: your memory. Let's talk about that next. Every night you sleep, your brain performs a process remarkably similar to pressing save on a computer. Experiences from the day move from short-term storage into more durable neural network, a process driven largely by the hippocampus, your brain's memory center. But remove sleep, and that transfer weakens dramatically. In fact, research shows the brain's ability to form new memories can drop by nearly 40% after a night of severe sleep restriction. Imagine attending an important meeting, studying for hours, having meaningful conversations, and your brain simply fails to store them properly. As neuroscientist Dr. Matthew Walker explains, without sleep, the brain becomes waterlogged with memories it cannot process. Let me give you a clinical-style example. A medical student once told me, "I studied all night, but during the exam, it felt like the information wasn't there. The effort was real, the encoding was not." Because sleep is not wasted time. It is when learning is biologically reinforced. But here is something even more concerning. Sleep deprivation doesn't just block new memories. It makes the brain more forgetful in the present moment. You misplace objects, lose track of conversations, forget commitments. This is why sleep-deprived professionals often rely heavily on notes, alarm, and reminders. Their brain is compensating for reduced reliability. And beneath this cognitive fog, another process is quietly building. Pressure inside the brain, a buildup most people never consider. Because when you don't sleep, your brain misses its only real opportunity to clean itself. Let's finish with that. The hidden overnight process many neurologists consider essential for long-term brain health. While you sleep, your brain does something extraordinary. It cleans itself. Neurologists call this system the glymphatic system, a network that flushes out metabolic waste accumulated during the day. Think of it as a nighttime sanitation crew. When you stay awake, that crew never shows up, and the debris remains. Among those wastes is beta amyloid, a protein strongly associated with cognitive decline when allowed to accumulate over time. Now, missing one night does not mean disease. But physicians pay attention to patterns because the brain was never designed for chronic sleep neglect. As pioneering neuroscientist Dr. Mike Nettergaard, who helped uncover this system, explained, Sleep is the price we pay for a brain that works. Skip the payment often enough, and the brain keeps the bill. But here is the insight I want you to leave with. After one poor night, your brain is not broken. It is strained. Most healthy brains recover beautifully with restorative sleep. The real danger begins when sleep loss becomes a lifestyle rather than an exception. Let me share something I tell every patient. You can survive without sleep, but you cannot perform at your highest level. Because sleep is not passive. It is active neurological protection. Protection for your memory, your emotions, your judgment, your long-term brain resilience. Thomas Edison once called sleep a criminal waste of time. Modern medicine would strongly disagree. So tonight, instead of asking, can I function without sleep, ask the better question. What version of my brain do I want to wake up with tomorrow? Because few decisions influence your mental clarity, emotional strength, and future cognitive health more than the simple act of going to sleep.